All right. So today I'm going to be talking about writing the essays for a APIC internship. So the essays are difficult. I think that they are um, very different from the essays you write when you're applying to grad school. It's very different from if you have to write anything for any practicum experiences you have before internship, and it's just a very different experience. I think it's also hard because everyone has different advice on how to write them. But I will just kind of share like broadly how I approach them, and then hopefully it's helpful to whoever needs it. So first, I highly recommend that you get the APIC internship workbook as a guide to help you get through the whole process, but especially when it comes to writing the essays. They have a lot of really great information in there. They've got some example cover letters, example essays, and just some ways that you can make your application stronger. I will say, I believe this current workbook was um, published in 2018, 2019, something like that. It's a few years old. The information is still really helpful, but the prompts in it are different from what is currently in the APPIC. So when you go before you start writing anything, make sure you check the website to see what the prompts are. I put the link for the website in the description. And I just want to say that because last year, as I was going through the process, the diversity essay prompt was changed, and they did send it out through the listserv. But if you're not on the listserv, which you should be, you did not get that change unless you regularly check the website. And it didn't change a lot, but it was the wording of it that kind of changed how people would have written it. So make sure you check to see what the prompts are. Sign up for the listserv, which I'll have information on how to do that as well. And just stay on top of it. Use the workbook. We just know it's a few years old. So with the essays, you have an autobiographical essay, you have a theoretical orientation essay, a diversity essay, and a research essay. So it's four essays. They all have not a character limit. That would be awful. Has a word limit of 500 words each. And the autobiographical one is basically like when someone says, "Tell me about yourself," except it's more about like, tell me about how your experiences have led you to be ready for internship and blah, blah, blah. So let me actually find the prompts for you right now. So this is actually what is currently on the APPIC website. So these are the essay prompts as they are right now. And so the autobiographical statement is literally an autobiographical statement. The workbook is going to really help you figure out what that means for you. But it's beyond tell me about yourself, even though they say it like this. It's a little different. But it's basically like, for me, I talked about how I not just came to psychology and kind of the clinical and like school psychology, but also like how my training has prepared me to continue on in the future. So it's not just like the personal statement you write for grad school. It's a little bit deeper than that. It's not just here's what I've done up until this point. It's like here's who I am and some of the experiences that made me that way. When it comes to your theoretical orientation, this one is interesting because it can be as simple as this is the theoretical orientation of my program. So that's the lens I come from. For some people, that is the answer. And obviously you have to expand on that a little bit, give some examples of how you use that in your work. But for some people, it might be like, well, my program is really grounded in CBT, but through, these different experiences I've had, I've kind of pulled from this lens and this orientation, and that is how I kind of conceptualize my cases and how it informs intervention. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like, this is what I learned, so this is what I do, which is also very likely, but you really need to be able to explain how you use that in your work. This is the one that was changed. I don't remember what it was before, but it's what it was before is what is in the workbook. I think this changed it to use a de-identified case. Before it was kind of just like, how does multicultural and diversity, how do multicultural and diversity variables like influence your work? But this one specifically says to use case examples, and people weren't always doing that. So make sure if this stays the same, you're talking about a case or two in it. And it may depend if you want to talk about, two cases briefly or one more elaborately. I decided to write one and kind of expand on the various variables in the case that I use, but it really depends. And then describe your research experience and interest. That's kind of self-explanatory. Talk about your research. Because the internship year is primarily clinical, unless you're looking for a research-based internship, like this is kind of just like, this is what I like, this is what my dissertation is, and you can kind of talk about how you came to that kind of topic. So that one I think is really interesting, but that's, to me, was probably the easiest to write. But when it comes to like the order of how to write it, or like what do you do, like who do you send it to, I would say I personally started with research because that was the easiest one for me. I wanted it out of the way. I didn't go through as many drafts with that one. It was just like, this is my research, this is what I do. And if you're in a research program, you've probably talked about your research a lot, and that one is probably the easiest one. I think the autobiographical one was the second one that I wrote. It wasn't the easiest, but because it was just about me and not about like my training experiences, that one felt easier to me. I don't know if that's the case for everyone. But that one went through a couple rounds just because I wanted it to be authentic to me, but I also wanted it to be clear to other people, like what I was talking about. Theoretical orientation one, again, you either have, the theoretical orientation of your program and that's it, or you've got more to expand on. And then the diversity, like the multicultural one, is one that I think people get in their heads about. Refer to the workbook for that one, even though it is a slightly different prompt. The information they give is very helpful. What I will say kind of like broader about these essays is be authentic to you. Be as authentic to you as you can be, because the reality is some people read the essays and some don't, but the ones that do are going to ask you questions about what you wrote in your essays. So do not lie. Don't lie about the experiences you've had. Don't lie about any of the training you've had. Don't lie about your goals. That's a very strange thing to lie about. Like if you're lying about goals to make it fit with certain internships, you probably shouldn't be applying there. As you're writing your essays, also remember that you can submit the same essays to every single site. I think that's like highly recommended. Most people will say just submit the same essays to every site, because if you're changing them a lot, do you really think that that's the right place for you? There might be instances where if you're applying to different types of settings, maybe you have essays for a hospital and then you have essays for like school-based sites. Maybe those look a little bit different because the way you approach cases in both look different. But you shouldn't be writing essays for every single site. Just write the 4 essays and submit them as they are. Some people will tell you to play it safe in the essays. As someone who's only been on the applicant side and who has not been a DCT, a training director, or anything, I can't say that this is, like standard advice, but I feel like if you're not true to yourself in these essays, you could potentially end up in places that you may be miserable. So don't dismiss or diminish some of your passions or beliefs just because you think those will keep you from getting an internship. The reality is internship is, a great training opportunity, but it is a checkbox to get through your program. And at the end of the day, all of us just want an internship, which is true, but we also don't want to be miserable for it either. So if you feel that there is something that's relevant in the essays that you really want to touch on, but you're scared that people will read it and will clutch their pearls, maybe those aren't the right places for you. For me, I wouldn't even say that my research is like radical. but I'm very much focused in like Black parents, Black children in early childhood, and like that is the lens that I wrote a lot of my essays in. And like even just doing that, like I want to work with Black children and their families. Some people would be like, well, why would you come here? And it's like, well, as much as I want to work with them, I'm not going to be, miserable working with other populations. I'm just telling you what my interests are. And the same thing goes for people who are really interested in, I would say, like social justice work, period. That is, I know it's like a hot topic and it shouldn't be, and it shouldn't be political or controversial. But I would have conversations with like your DCT and your advisor or people you trust, rather, mentors about, how much of that you should include. I wouldn't say erase it from your essays completely. And I wouldn't say go full force. Like there's definitely a balance, but I would hate for you to not have it in there at all because you're afraid of not, of ruffling feathers and not getting it. And I know that's like a privileged perspective to come from, but I also believe in people not being miserable for a year. A lot of people will say, you can do a year of anything. And I think that that's only true for certain people. And I don't think you should have to forfeit your well-being to do it, Yeah. Anyway, now that I'm off that soapbox, the last thing I'll say is don't have too many people read your essays. So I only had my DCT read it. I sent it to both of my parents. They're not in psychology at all. They're not in this in any related field, but I sent it to them for clarity. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Because if my parents don't understand it, am I really being clear? And then I sent it to one other person who offered to read it, and I was like, okay. But that's it. 4 people, and only really 2 of them are related to the field. Especially people who've gone through this process before, they're going to have a lot of opinions. So I really leaned on my parents to just help me make sure what I was saying was clear, making sure that I wasn't, just kind of word vomiting all over the document. But those are the recommendations I have for the essays. So use the workbook. If you know someone in your program with the workbook, get it from them. They haven't updated it yet. I think they might be, maybe they're working on a new edition. I'm not sure, but it's evergreen. It has been helpful for people for years, and it will continue to be. So get that if you can. And other than that, that's all I got. So I will do another video on cover letters and then another one on ranking. That's like, don't even worry about that. So I will catch you soon. Bye.